Hello, this is Charles Voth, and welcome to Identifying and Manipulating Structure in English. In this video, we will cover how to analyze and identify different parts of English so that you can develop better speeches and better writing and be really intentional with what you want to say and how you want to say it. We'll start with labeling each word in English. So every word can have at least 2 labels and sometimes 3 or more. The first label that we always identify is the part of speech, and the second is the role in the sentence. Sometimes this is called a grammatical function. So an analogy of this is, for example, to think of a woman. So a woman is a female human. That would be the equivalent of the part of speech. Okay, and then the role in the sentence would be an equivalent would be a woman could be a chemist, a dancer, a grandmother, a daughter, a girlfriend, a wife, a mom. So lots of different roles are possible for the concept of woman. In grammar, similar things can happen. Usually there's just one part of speech for each word, but the role in the sentence can change. Some words have lots of different roles, and some words only have one. So let's look at some examples of this. The word cat. This is a noun. If I add it in a group of words, the cat from Spain, now the role of this is the head noun of a noun phrase. It's called a head noun because the cat from Spain is still all about the cat. The word the helps it be specific. The words from Spain give it some more details and some characteristics of its origin. As a whole, the cat from Spain is a noun phrase, but cat is the head noun. In the next example, the cat walked across the fence. I have a complete sentence. In this sentence, cat is the subject. Now, if a noun has a noun phrase along with it, like the cat, we usually can consider these as a unit, the noun phrase, and together the cat is the subject of the sentence. Words in English seldom work alone. They often belong to a group of words called a phrase. A phrase is not the same thing as a sentence. A phrase is usually shorter and it has a particular function or role to play inside a sentence. A phrase will have a label that is associated with a part of speech, but often the part of speech name will not apply to every member word of that phrase. So let's look at this example here. In the morning, in is a preposition, the is a determiner, an article to be more specific, and morning is a noun. So even though we have a determiner and a noun, we call this phrase a prepositional phrase because it is started with a preposition. Part of speech labels for phrases do not always lean on what that first word in the phrase is, but often that's the case. But you will see as we go through the different types of phrases and their labels will depend more on the weight of a particular part of speech in the phrase. More on that later. Another aspect about phrases is that they have a role or a function to play in the sentence, and these also can be labeled. The role label, again, will be, or most likely will be different than the role of each individual word in the phrase. So let's look again at the same examples. So when I have a preposition, the noun phrase that comes after the preposition, so this is a noun phrase, has the role of being the object of this preposition. So even though I have a preposition with an object, as a group, this whole phrase acts as an adverbial. The adverbial role is one that answers questions of time and place and a few other things which we will go into more depth later. But for now, you can see that in the morning answers the question when something happens. So in this sentence, we'll get a coffee. If I just say that short sentence, we'll get a coffee, you have no idea of when we will do that, except that it'll be sometime in the future. So I add the adverbial in the morning to give you the sense of time when that is actually going to happen. So this phrase has an adverbial role. Phrases can have different parts of speech and different roles in the sentence. We will look at all of these in more detail. Words can be classified into 9 parts of speech. That group of 9 can be split into 2 different categories, content words and function words. We're going to start with content words. Those are nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs, and they carry the weight of the message when we speak or when we write. If all we used was content words, people would be able to kind of make out what we were talking about. Let's look at adjectives first. So adjectives describe or highlight aspects of a noun. Words like green for the color of something, round for the shape, intelligent for what I judge somebody to be like. Same with kind. I'm judging a person whether they're kind or not. Old describes the condition or the age of something. French is the origin. Healthy is the condition, as is sick. So I can have a green apple, a round apple, an intelligent student, a kind friend, an old man, a French woman, a healthy dog, a sick cat, etc., etc. Adjectives are individual words. Adverbs are also individual words, and they describe verbs, but also they can describe adjectives and other adverbs. So here, he runs slowly. It describes the running activity. She speaks wisely. It describes the speaking activity. They played stupidly describes the activity of playing. Now, the words very and quite don't quite describe a verb. I wouldn't say I run very or I quite think. So these adverbs describe adjectives. So this apple is very green. This person is quite intelligent. So that's how they describe adjectives. But they can also describe other adverbs. I walk very slowly. He spoke quite wisely. So again, these words as adverbs can describe other adverbs. The next content words that we're going to focus on are nouns. So nouns are anything that is a person, a place, a thing, an activity, which we'll get into more depth below, and concepts. So for example, a boy, Toronto for a place, ball for things, skiing for activities, or education as a concept. So stop the video and think of a noun for each of these 5 different kinds, just so that you're sure of the concept. Now we're going to look at special categories of nouns. This category are called verbals. Very confusing because you can see the word verb, but they are not verbs. They are nouns with verb-like characteristics. So they are nouns and they're part of speech, but sometimes they behave like a verb, and we will look at all of these characteristics below. There are 2 kinds of verbals, gerunds and infinitives, and we will now move on to look at these more specifically. Gerunds are formed by taking a base verb, which basically is what you see in a dictionary when a verb is listed. There's no changes to the spelling of it, and you add ing to it. Remember that some verbs will have spelling changes when the ing is added. So for example, hit is a base verb. When you add ing, you have to double the consonant. But every spelling of a verb is slightly different. Here is an example of skiing. In this sentence, skiing is a noun. The role of the gerund in this sentence is the subject. It starts the sentence off, and this sentence is about skiing. Only nouns can be subjects. Therefore, this gerund is a noun and it is a subject. Here we have another sentence. Downhill skiing is fun. Again, it's the sentence, so it's the subject of this sentence. One other way we know that this is a noun is it's being described by the adjective downhill. Again, only nouns can be described by adjectives, so that helps us realize that skiing is a noun. Now, the way that gerunds act like verbs is they can also be described by adverbs. Skiing recklessly would be dumb. So I have a gerund phrase here. Remember that a phrase consists of more than one word that has the part of speech labeled to it. So recklessly is an adverb that describes skiing, but together, skiing recklessly is a gerund phrase, which means that it's a noun and it can act as the subject of this sentence. Sometimes a noun is the object of a verb. In this case, I don't like skiing. Like is the verb of the sentence, and skiing is the object. So this is also a noun role. Sometimes a noun is the object of a preposition. So about is a preposition, and skiing comes after it. That means that this gerund, skiing, is the object of about. His thoughts about skiing aren't worth talking about. So this is a noun with the role of object of preposition. We will be looking more at the role of object in more detail coming up. What I'd like you to do now is stop the video, think of a base verb, any verb that comes to mind, add the ing to it. Now, can you use that gerund as the subject of a sentence? Can you describe that gerund with an adjective? Can you add an adverb to it? Can you use it as the object of a sentence? So you could just randomly choose any verb, like dance. To change it to a gerund, we would say dancing. Now let's use it as a subject. Dancing is difficult. Let's describe it with an adjective. Salsa dancing is fun. Let's describe it with an adverb. Dancing fast hurts my feet. Let's use it as an object. I enjoy dancing. Let's use it as the object of a preposition. My parents did not believe in dancing. Remember, there are two kinds of verbals, gerunds, and the second kind are infinitives. To make an infinitive, you get a base verb and you add the word to in front of it. Here are some examples. To ski would be fun. To ski is a noun because it's an infinitive, which is a verbal, which is a kind of noun. In this sentence, the function or the role of this infinitive is the subject. Infinitives are not described by adjectives. So I would not say downhill to ski. So that's one thing that's different about an infinitive and a gerund. But infinitives can be followed by an adverb. To ski recklessly must not be permitted. This whole group of words is an infinitive phrase. So it acts as a unit, and in this sentence, the infinitive phrase is the subject of the sentence. Infinitives can also be the object of a verb. So I have the sentence, I don't plan something. The something is the object. So I'm going to use an infinitive to ski and put it in this sentence. Another use of infinitives is completely different. So even though it is a noun, because it's a verbal, in this sentence, he got new goggles. If I ended the sentence there, that would be okay. But let's say I want to tell you the purpose. What was the purpose of his getting new goggles? The purpose was to ski in Quebec. So this group of words is an infinitive phrase, and the function of this is an adverbial of purpose. So even though it's a noun as a part of speech, its function or its role is an adverbial of purpose. One way to check if an infinitive is an adverbial of purpose is to add the words in order in front. So if I say, he got new goggles in order to ski in Quebec, then that sounds correct. If I tried putting in order to ski would be fun, it sounds wrong. It's not correct. It's completely weird because in order to ski cannot be a subject. It can only be an adverbial of purpose. Stop the video now. Choose any random verb like dance. Add the to in front of it and try to use it as a subject. To dance is good exercise. Try adding an adverb in front of it. To dance quickly is hard to do. Try to use it as the object of a verb. I decided to dance salsa. and try to use it as an adverbial of purpose. I went to the pub to dance with my friends. Or I went to the pub in order to dance with my friends. Try it yourself. We're moving from nouns, and now we're going to talk about verbs. This is the fourth kind of content word in the 9 parts of speech. There are 3 main kinds of verbs: dynamic verbs, and you can imagine just by the word dynamic that they show an action or some kind of process. There are stative verbs, which show a state of being or a sense. There are not very many stative verbs, and here are a few of them: become, remain, turn, sound, appear, look, taste, and you can see the last 5 here are from the 5 senses. Then there is a linking verb. A linking verb is going to be the verb be in all of its forms. So it can be am, is, are, was, were, will be, has been, have been, is being, and was being. All of these are the verb be in different times or tenses. It doesn't matter. It doesn't change it from being a linking verb. Linking verbs connect the subject of a sentence with a complement. Subjects and complements are sentence roles or functions, and we're going to cover those in the future. The important thing is to look out for the verb be, and that is a signal that it could be a linking verb. Sometimes the verb be is a helping verb or an auxiliary, and it behaves a little differently. We'll also get into that. Stop the video. Can you think of 3 dynamic verbs? Something that shows an action or a process. Can you use 2 or 3 of these stative verbs in a sentence and just show how they describe the state of being? So if I say he remained calm, his state of being was calmness. So that is how this doesn't describe any kind of activity or action. By remaining calm, it's actually the absence of action. And there's no process. It describes the condition or the state of being of the person I'm describing. So try to think of a sentence or 2 with some of these stative verbs. We'll work on linking verbs and complements in the future. Here are some sentences that contain some verbs. Dynamic verbs: we ran, they jumped, she thinks, I am considering, you will need this. Notice that it's easy to visualize running and jumping, but thinking and considering and need are a little bit more abstract. But they are still mental processes, or there's activity that's going on in the brain. So, and need is an emotional activity. So these, although you can't necessarily visualize some kind of physical activity, they're still considered dynamic. The pasta tastes bland. You looked sad, and the song will sound awesome. Okay, the pasta cannot, by its own choice, taste in a particular way. It's just the state of what it's like. If I say you looked sad, you're not choosing to look sad. It's just your appearance and how I take it from when I look at you. The song will sound awesome. It's not actually about the sound waves that are coming from the song. This is just how it hits my ears. So again, it's a stative verb because the subject of the sentence cannot do anything about it. And here is the verb be as linking verbs in these sentences. I was a teacher. She is nuts. They are from Barry. The problem has been their negativity. Notice that after the linking verbs, there is not another verb here. If you had a different verb after any of the verbs be, of the verb to be in any of its forms, then it's no longer a linking verb. So that is your clue. So write a few sentences out, or look at things you've written before, or find a newspaper article or listen to a video online and look at the transcript or the closed caption of the video. And just see if you can identify some dynamic verbs, some stative verbs, and examples of a linking verb. Now we're going to look more specifically at dynamic verbs themselves. So there's two kinds, and these are called transitive verbs and intransitive verbs. All right, if you look at the word transitive, inside it, you will notice the word transit, which means to move from one thing to another. In the case of dynamic verbs, what's happening is the verb is causing something to move from one state to another state. So for example, we kicked the ball. So kicked is a transitive verb and it's followed by an object. So what happens is the ball was just sitting there and then it got kicked. So there was some kind of movement or force or energy that impacted that ball. We ate a donut. Again, the verb eat in this case is transitive. It has an object after it, and it means that the donut was eaten, it disappeared, so something happened to it. So it was in one state of being, which was on the plate, and then it was in somebody's stomach. So that is how things got moved from one state to another. That's what transitive means. With intransitive verbs, the in means that it is not movement. So there is no object. The action just kind of happens and then it fizzles out. So we walked. Okay, we didn't walk something. We didn't walk the box. We didn't walk the car. It is possible to say we walked the dog, but you'll notice the meaning slightly changes from we walked to the store and we walked the dog. So we walked the dog, we actually moved the dog from one place to another. But we walked to the store, there's nothing that's being moved except we're the people doing the activity ourselves. They cried, so nothing comes after they cried. It's just the action, and then at some point it fizzles out. We wondered. This is a thinking verb, so we can't see it visually, but there is some kind of activity happening in our brains, and then it eventually fizzles out. So with intransitive verbs, there cannot be an object. Like I explained with the example of we walked the dog and we walked to the store, some dynamic verbs can be both transitive and intransitive, depending completely on the situation that you're describing. We drove the truck to the mechanic. I have an object. So drive in this case is transitive because something is getting moved or impacted. We drove quickly to the mechanic. There's no object here, so in this case it's intransitive. Stop the video. Think of some dynamic verbs that are transitive and write or think a sentence, or just say it out loud. Can you change that verb into an intransitive situation? Maybe not. If you look up verbs in the dictionary, you will see some interesting abbreviations in really good dictionaries. You will see VT. This means verb transitive. Or you might see VI, which means verb intransitive. So if you're not sure whether a verb is intransitive or not, you can always look it up in the dictionary. And the dictionary should provide example sentences to give you an idea how to insert an object when the verb is transitive. So we're going to continue looking at verbs, but now we're going to look at a special format for verbs. This format is called participles. And what a participle does is it shows something about tense or time when we're using it, or sometimes it can have an adjectival rule, which means it behaves like an adjective. So there are two kinds of participles. The present participle is formed by a base verb and ing. Oh my goodness, you might say, that's the same thing as a gerund. And unfortunately in English, we don't have two different ways to spell a participle versus a gerund. So unfortunately, they look a lot alike. They look exactly alike. And it's up to us to figure out how they work in the sentence. The other one is the past participle. To make a past participle, you take the base verb and you add ed. So if I have walk, I add ed and it's walked. And this is the past participle. Some irregular forms are also make the past participle. So for example, if I have the verb begin, the past participle is begun. So past participles are used in verbs. Oh, I'll be actually on the next slide, I'll show you how we use present participles and past participles. So looking at present participles, remember that they look exactly like gerunds. And in fact, I used the same word, skiing, just to help highlight the differences. So in this sentence, the part of speech is the present participle, and its function is to show the continuous aspect of the verb tense, together with the auxiliary was. So he was skiing. This is my verb phrase. It's the group of words that acts together as the verb of this sentence. The verb was shows that it happened in the past. The verb skiing in the present participle, even though we're talking about the past, what the word present here means is that it makes it feel like it's ongoing. So he was skiing too quickly for my comfort stretches out the meaning into, the length of time it took him maybe to go down the hill, or the length of time that he spent at the ski lodge for a complete day. It stretches out that time frame. So that's what the present participle does when it is part of a verb phrase. It forms the continuous aspect. Present participles can be described by adverbs. So here we have too quickly is an adverb phrase describing skiing. Skiing can also, or the present participle can also have an adjective function. So the skiing youth couldn't be found at midnight. Here I have a present participle in front of a noun between a determiner and a noun. So that cannot be a verb. We don't stick verbs between determiners and nouns. And it describes youth, which means it's an adjectival function. So this is a present participle and it describes youth. Stop the video, think of any base verb and add ing. Can you use it with a continuous verb tense? You can say present continuous like I am skiing, you are skiing, or you can do past continuous. I was skiing, we were skiing. Try and choose any verb, make it into the present participle and make a sentence with the continuous aspect. Then take the verb, take the present participle of that verb, and see if you can use it as an adjective to describe a noun. Not all verbs work as adjectives in present participle situations. It really depends on the meaning of the verb. But to stick with the example I've already been using, how about dancing? So if I say, the dancing tigers at the circus were my favorite exhibit. I have an article, a determiner, in other words, I have a noun, and I have a present participle adjectival describing the tigers. See what you can do. As I mentioned in the previous slide, ing forms are the same, even though there's different functions. So let's look at some contrast between the two of them. Traveling around Europe is my dream. Now, in this sentence, it's the first word, which means it's not likely going to be a verb because verbs appear after the subject. So we can guess that the role in the sentence here is a subject. So in this case, it's a gerund, also called a verbal or a noun. It is modified by around Europe. So this is an adverbial that describes traveling. But as a group, this is a gerund phrase, and it is the subject of the sentence. Let's look at this one. They were traveling to Japan. Well, they is going to be the subject. We have an auxiliary verb here, and then we have an ing verb here. This lets us know that it's the present participle, and it's giving the continuous aspect. The role in the sentence is the main verb. Okay, let's look at this one. Traveling nomads don't spend much time in populated areas. This is a little bit different than traveling around Europe. So even though it's the first word, it is not the noun that is spending much time in populated areas. That happens to be the nomads. So traveling nomads is an adjectival role for this present participle. That means that traveling nomads as a group is a noun phrase, and it's the subject of the sentence. So can you choose an ing form and try to use it as a gerund in subject position, try to use it as the continuous, and try to use it as the adjectival format? So for example, dancing is fun. Here it is as a subject. I was dancing all night. It's the main verb of this sentence. Dancing shoes aren't cheap. It's describing what kind of shoes, so it's an adjectival form. See if you can make 3 sentences using the same ing form. The next type of participle that we want to look at in more detail is the past participle. This is formed with adding ed, or in some cases there are irregular verb spellings. He has never eaten snails. So eaten is the past participle for eat. So we'll have eat. The past for eat is ate. The past participle for eat is eaten. So eat, ate, eaten. This is an irregular verb form. In this sentence, it is the past participle, and it is called the perfect aspect of the verb tense. By perfect doesn't mean that there's no mistakes, but perfect has the sensation that the activity is complete or about to be completed. It is used together with the auxiliary verb has or have. In this sentence, it is being described by the adverb never. So that is another way to clue in to see if it is a verb function or if it has an adjectival function. In this sentence, the partially eaten sandwich was sitting on the counter. Okay, so here we have the verb sitting. Sandwich is the thing that's doing the sitting, so this is the noun. Eaten is a past participle, but it's describing the condition of that sandwich. Partially is an adverb that describes eaten, and the is a determiner. The partially eaten sandwich as a group is a noun phrase. It begins with a determiner and has a key noun in it. So then we know that this past participle has an adjectival function describing sandwich. Stop the video and think of a past participle that you can use both in the verb sense or in the adjectival sense. My using dance probably won't work in the adjectival form. So I need to think of a different verb. So I will use the verb open. So I have opened a bank account. In this case, we know that it is not an adjective because it is not describing the word bank. And there is a determiner before bank, and opened is not in between the determiner and the bank. So in this case, it is part of the verb phrase have opened. It gives me the time frame that I recently or I just finished opening this bank account. I can then use it as an adjective in this sentence. The opened door was dirty. Okay, so here's my noun and here's my determiner. And so I have an adjective form in between the two. So this is the adjectival function of the past participle. I'd like you to try yourselves, so just stop the video and practice a couple sentences. The second category out of the 9 parts of speech are the structural words. So the structural words are the words that kind of fill in between the content words to help clarify the message. So there's 5 different groups of structural words. We're going to focus on conjunctions in this video. There will be links to pronouns, auxiliary verbs, prepositions, and determiners in the show notes below the video. So structural words are also called function words, but that can be confusing because they don't necessarily act with only one function. So I prefer to think of them as having structure and having different roles to play in the sentence. So we're going to look at conjunctions a little bit more in depth. There's 2 kinds. The first kind are called coordinating conjunctions, but it's a lot easier sometimes to remember the acronym FANBOYS. Each letter of the acronym stands for one of the 7 coordinating conjunctions. The ones that I've highlighted here in pink are the 4 most commonly used. Okay, so what are coordinating conjunctions used for? They're used to join parallel parts of speech and sometimes parallel sentence roles. So, for example here, I have Jim and John. So two nouns together form a compound noun group, or a noun phrase with compound nouns. The word compound means joined together. Verbs can also be made compound with coordinating conjunctions, such as run and play. Adjectives, they are boring and exhausting. Adverbs, slowly and quietly, they crept across the field. So these are individual words that are joined with a coordinating conjunction. Usually and, or is also common, and but happens once in a while. Then you can use prepositional phrases and put two of them together, also using coordinating conjunctions. So here I have an example. In the cupboard and in the pantry are both prepositional phrases. So they are joined with the coordinating conjunction nor. They aren't in the cupboard nor in the pantry. And lastly, you can join independent clauses, or another word for a complete sentence, and you can join them with a comma and the coordinating conjunction. We saw them, but we didn't talk to them. If I erase these and put a period here and a capital letter here, I have two independent sentences. The other type of conjunction are called subordinating conjunctions. Subordinating conjunctions are used at the clause level. So they join two different clauses together. The clause that contains or begins with the subordinating conjunction is going to be the dependent clause. And the dependent clause begins with the subordinating conjunction, and then that connects the idea to the independent clause. And these create complex sentences. Here are just 4 subordinating conjunctions, but there are about 20-something in English. Because he liked skiing, he traveled to Quebec 5 times each winter. So here is our dependent clause, and it begins with the subordinating conjunction because. This clause is starting the sentence off, which means that I need to put a comma. As I say this sentence in oral language, there will be a natural pause at the comma, and the intonation of the voice will go down. So because he liked skiing, you notice that skiing goes down in intonation, and then there's a pause. Because he liked skiing, he traveled to Quebec 5 times each winter. That shows that you need to put a comma. Let's look at the next one. While he was there, he stayed at 2 different ski lodges. Again, my voice goes down and there's a pause. Some people might have a little bit more variation in their intonation. It might sound like this. While he was there, so it kind of wobbles up and down. There's still a pause, therefore we need the comma. He stayed at 2 different ski lodges. Let's look at the dependent clauses in the last 2 examples. He rented skis although he was a professional. I don't pause, and my intonation doesn't come down. He rented skis although he was a professional. In fact, the sound z of skis kind of blends together with the of although. He rented skis although he was a professional. There's no gap, so therefore there's no comma. Another way to think of it is the dependent clause is last in the sentence. When it's last, we don't need a comma. People often asked for his signature when they saw him. Again, signature when. My when blends together. I do not have a pause. This dependent clause comes after. One thing about subordinating conjunctions is they definitely introduce dependent clauses, but these dependent clauses all have an adverbial function. They are adverbials because they answer questions like why. Why did he travel to Quebec 5 times each winter? When? He stayed at 2 different ski lodges. When? While he was there. Although shows in contrast to. So he rented skis. In contrast to he was a professional. It kind of means that if he was a professional, we wouldn't expect him to rent skis. We'd expect him to own his own set or more than one pair. So it's a little unusual that he rented skis. So although shows a contrast that is surprising or unexpected. People often asked for his signature when they saw him. So this obviously answers the question, when. We'll look more at adverbials in the future. For now, stop the video and see if you can make a sentence or 4 sentences with because, although, when, and while, and change it up a bit. Put some of them in the first position with a comma and some of them in the second position without a comma. Here are links to the last 4 parts of speech. They will be treated in another video at another time. For now, if you look at these lists, you'll be able to find and recognize lots of the little words that fill in all the spaces in our phrases and in our sentences. So if you remember back to the first couple slides, I said that every word has a part of speech, and every word, or if it's part of a phrase, has a grammatical role. So now we're going to look at different grammatical roles or functions in sentences. The first one is the subject. So the subject is the noun that receives the focus of the sentence. It could be a noun phrase. However, it's not necessarily the topic of the sentence. Also, the subject of the sentence is not necessarily the doer of the action, but in general, you can say that the subject does the action. However, there are lots of exceptions. So let's look at 2 examples here. The farmer is the noun phrase. The farmer rode the horse across the field. So the farmer did the action, or was the doer, of riding the horse. The next sentence, the corn was taken to market by the farmer. So the corn is what's receiving the focus of the sentence. It leads it off, so it's highlighted at the first of the sentence. However, the corn does not do the action. It cannot take itself to market, so it has to be taken there. So when we express things like that, this is called the passive voice. When the subject does not do the action, but receives the action, however, it is the grammatical subject of the sentence, then we call it the passive voice. In the passive voice, you'll often see a prepositional phrase that explains who did it. Stop the video and see if you can identify all of the subjects in the sentences you've written so far. The next grammatical role that we're looking at is again one that is assigned to nouns and noun phrases, or gerunds, or infinitives. So the object of the verb is this important role. So the object of the verb is the recipient of the action of the verb. However, not all verbs are an action that is acting upon another thing or person. So in that case, the verb kind of has an experience or a benefit, or some kind of concept that's more abstract that is being rolled out. And the object is the thing that is impacted by that. Okay, so let's look at these sentences. The farmer rode the horse across the field. Obviously, the horse is getting impacted by having the farmer on a saddle on its back. So it is the recipient of the action of riding. The farmer picked the corn. So the corn is receiving the action of getting picked. The farmer picked the corn and milled it. So this it is a pronoun that means corn. And the action here is milled or getting ground up. So again, the corn is receiving the action of the milling. So it is an object pronoun. She baked the corn flour into bread. So I have the corn flour as the noun phrase, and it is receiving the impact of getting mixed up with other ingredients and stuffed into an oven and heated up and getting baked into bread. So it is the object. Then we can have a sentence where you kind of have two objects. She took her friends the bread. So she didn't take her friends somewhere, so the friends are not directly receiving the action of take, of being taken. So her friends are benefiting from the bread. So these are called indirect objects because it benefited indirectly from receiving the bread. The bread is the direct object because it is receiving the direct action of being taken by the subject, she, by the farmer basically. Okay, let's look at a passive voice. Some of the corn was taken to market by the farmer. When some of the corn gets moved to the front of the sentence, even though we have the same verb take, it no longer is the object of the sentence. This becomes the subject. So the position of the object is obviously after the main verb of the predicate. So think of a couple noun phrases and put them into object position after dynamic verbs. Another kind of object that nouns or noun phrases can be are objects of prepositions. A couple slides back, I gave you a link to an extensive list of prepositions. Prepositions are these little words that come after verbs or between nouns and other nouns. Let's look at the first situation. So if we have a phrasal verb, and a phrasal verb means that there is a dynamic verb and a preposition after it. And the two of them together often have a completely new meaning than each word alone. So if I look at look after, so with look after, I'm really not using my eyes completely, and definitely it isn't happening after a certain period in time. So look after means care for or taking care of. So it has a completely different meaning than each word does separately. Believe in, this one, believe doesn't really necessarily change in meaning, but believe in is kind of like accept or adopt or take really seriously. So it has a slightly different meaning than just believe. Wait for, so this shows you the intent of waiting and who or what is being waited for. So I don't listen music, I listen to music. So I'm focusing my ear's ability to take in sound to a particular thing. So these prepositions need to be followed by nouns or noun phrases. I'll look after her kitten. That is the noun phrase. That is the object of after. It is not the object of the verb look. She doesn't believe in fate. Fate is the object of in. They are waiting for the blue school bus from the kids club. All of this is one long noun phrase. The head noun of this noun phrase is bus. School bus is an adjective. Blue bus is another adjective. The is a determiner. From is a preposition. And here I have another noun phrase, which is the object of the preposition from. So think back to the onion. You can have preposition phrases inside other noun phrases, which are the objects of other prepositions. These are called nested prepositional phrases, but each noun group inside a prepositional phrase is the object of a preposition. We listened to opera music. Opera music is the noun phrase, and it is the object of to. The other meaning of object of preposition is when we're connecting a noun phrase to another one, and we're connecting it to particularly a head noun in another phrase. So the Jack is the first noun phrase. In the box, in is describing which Jack it is that we're talking about. The house on the corner is the object. On is connected to house. So the house on the corner, this prepositional phrase is describing this noun, which means that it's acting as an adjective. So we call this an adjectival prepositional phrase. But what's important on this slide is to remember that the words the box, the corner, the kids club, and the ditch are all objects of the prepositions that come in front of them. So they are not the object of verbs, they're the object of prepositions. So I challenge you to stop the video, think of 4 or 5 prepositions, or better yet, go back a few slides to the links. Actually, you can't go back on the slides. Look in the descriptions below this video and find the links to the lists of prepositions. Choose 5 prepositions, come up with noun phrases that can be objects of those prepositions, and then put the whole prepositional phrase into a sentence. The next grammatical role that we want to look at is the role of the complement. Complements can be connected to subjects or to objects. Now the word complement is different than the word compliment with an I in it. This is when you say nice things about somebody. So feel free to compliment me on this video in the comments. However, let's go back to complements. The word complement comes from the word complete, which is why it forms the definition of what a complement does. So a complement is a noun phrase, or an adjective that completes a thought that has been left open-ended in a sentence. So let's look at these sentences below. My father was a... This company is completely... The Prime Minister made his nephew... The top ingredient was... We painted the kitchen. Notice the last one kind of does make sense complete, but we could add some details. So we're missing things here. Now, my father was a... There's a hint that there's going to be noun. This company is completely... We have an adverb here. That means it's going to describe an adjective. The Prime Minister made his nephew, I don't know, into what? So we have a question of what. So that's going to be a noun. The top ingredient was what? It could be a noun. It could be an adjective. could be the top ingredient was expensive, or the top ingredient was a mushroom. So let's look at how we can complete these sentences with complements. All right, so my father was a nurse. Here is a noun phrase that is the complement of the subject, my father. So one thing you'll notice about complements is that they come after a linking verb when it is a subject complement. So we have subject, linking verb, complement. And this pattern is going to be very important to use and remember. This company is completely bankrupt. So I have an adjective and company and the linking verb is. So I have subject, company, plus linking verb is, plus the complement, completely bankrupt. The Prime Minister made his nephew an assistant director. This one's a little bit different. We don't have a linking verb here, but we have an object. So the Prime Minister made, this is the verb, his nephew is the object, and an assistant director is an object complement because it completes the idea of what his nephew was made into. We painted the kitchen. Paint is the verb. The kitchen is an object. So blue is a complement of kitchen. I can't say I painted the blue kitchen and have the same meaning as I painted the kitchen blue. I painted the blue kitchen means the kitchen was already blue and I either refreshed the paint or changed the color. We painted the kitchen blue means the kitchen was a different color to start with. So if it's in front of kitchen, it would just be an adjective, but because it's after, it's an adjective functioning as an object complement. My car is blue. This is just a complement, subject complement, describing my car. We felt blue about the lockdown. This sentence is to show you that you don't only need to use linking verbs, you can also use some of the stative verbs. We felt blue. This is a condition, an emotional mood that describes we. So it is a subject complement. The top ingredient was sugar. Again, I have a linking verb again, it's the verb to be. I have a noun, and it describes what the top ingredient was. With the subject and linking verb and complement structure, if the complement is a noun, then you can flip the sentence around. So I can say, sugar was the top ingredient. It doesn't work perfectly as a test. I could say, the nurse was my father. I would have to change a to the because I'd be talking specifically, but it kind of does work. I wouldn't say blue is my car because blue doesn't fit the noun requirement to do that flipping back and forth. But switching your subjects and your complements on either side of a linking verb is one way to test to see if this noun is indeed a complement of the subject. Please stop the video. Think of several linking verbs, or try using make or paint or feel, and see if you can come up with new sentences with different subject complements or object complements. In this video, the term predicate has come up a lot. The predicate head, also known as the main verb of a predicate, is an important one to be able to identify when you're labeling sentences. So the main verb, or the predicate head, is usually one of the first 3 or 4 words of the predicate. What is the predicate? The predicate is the verb phrase plus any objects or complements or adverbials that come after the subject. So I've color-coded this to help us out. The subjects are all a blue-gray color here at the beginning of these sentences. Then we're going to look for the verb phrase. So obviously verb phrase hints that there is more than one verb in the group and they act together as a unit. If we look at the last sentence, lettuce seeds are, there's only one verb there, so it is the main verb and it is the predicate head. If I say quickly ran, so I have an adverb describing ran, so this is my verb phrase. If I have several auxiliaries, so ought to is one auxiliary, have is another auxiliary, called will be my main verb or my predicate head, ought to have called is my verb phrase. Eating is the main verb, haven't been is our auxiliaries, and not happens to be an adverb. So have not been eating is my verb phrase. However, verb predicates are more than just the verb phrase. They also include objects. So I have much fish. Much is a determiner. Fish is a noun. So this is a noun phrase. That's the object of the verb phrase, haven't been eating. And lately answers the question when, so it's an adverb. They ought to have called us. Us is the object of called. Much, in this case, is an adverb because it says much earlier. So it's describing the time and intensifying it. The boy quickly ran around the block. So there's no object here. Ran is an intransitive verb. That means that there's no object. So around the block is a prepositional phrase because of the preposition around. And its role in the sentence is adverbial because it answers the question where. So again, going back to what these are, eating, called, ran, and are the main verbs or the predicate head. The next grammatical rule we'll look at is the adjectival rule. Basically, you can see the word adjective inside adjectival. That means that it's going to describe or enhance a noun or a noun phrase in the sentence. So adjectival is the big umbrella term. It can consist of a single word adjective, like this, the lonely calf. It can be a series of adjectives, the long, daunting climb. It can be a prepositional phrase. So here's my preposition. Here's the object of the preposition. Near is a preposition. As a group, this is an adjectival prepositional phrase, and it describes the boat. Remember that prepositional phrases often are a preposition in between one noun, the boat, and another noun, the dock, and the preposition describes the relationship, and it usually describes something about the noun in front of it. Another adjectival is the adjective clause. The adjective clause means that there is a predicate and a subject inside the clause itself. And this describes the boat. The boat is also a subject for the verb was, actually a linking verb was, and hers is a complement. Going back to the adjectival part of it, though, that sank near the dock is an adjective clause that describes boat. Hers is a complement that also describes boat. The grammatical role of adverbial means that, again, it's going to act like an adverb. So an adverbial can enhance a whole other sentence. It can enhance or describe another phrase, a verb, an adjective, or another adverb. An adverbial answers the questions why, when, how, and under which circumstances. So let's look at some examples. We drank abundantly answers the question how. We ate too also answers the question how. A prepositional phrase, remember we just looked at prepositional phrases that were adjectival. Prepositional phrases can also be adverbial because they will answer these questions. We drank where? At the bar. We drank under which circumstances? With friends. We drank how long? 4 hours. So these answer the questions of time and place and the circumstances. Each one of these is a preposition with a noun phrase after it. That makes a prepositional phrase which acts as an adverbial to describe drink. With friends is an adverbial that describes drink. Even though it's an adverbial, it doesn't contain an adverb. It contains a preposition, and it contains a noun. So this is the situation where phrases contain certain parts of speech but behave like a different grammatical function. For hours, here is a preposition and here is a noun. Together as a group, it's a prepositional phrase acting as an adverbial describing drink. Adverb clauses begin with subordinating conjunctions. Whenever is another subordinating conjunction we didn't look at yet. So I'll have a subject and a verb and an object and an adverb. All of these, invited us out, is the predicate of the clause. They is the subject of the clause, and when is the subordinating conjunction. All of this clause, because it's in first position, has a comma. My intonation says whenever they invited us out, so I go up and then back down, we would end up going to Burger King. So this describes in what conditions did we end up going to Burger King, or under which circumstances. The circumstances of us ending up going to Burger King were whenever they invited us out. So that is why it is an adverb, an adverbial, because of the function that it does in the sentence. Stop the video, see if you can come up with prepositional phrases that describe the verb and an adverb clause that describes the whole sentence. An important skill for every communicator, anybody who needs to speak professionally, which is pretty much anybody at a job with an audience, or somebody who has to write clearly in communication with emails, reports, etc. One of the things that happens is when we write or when we speak, we make mistakes. And when we go back and look at them, we sometimes can figure out what the mistake is and fix it, but sometimes it just sounds weird and we can't really quite figure it out. If you are able to make a sentence diagram of your sentences, you'll be able to figure out what parts are missing and what parts have been done incorrectly. So this skill of diagramming sentences is very useful to prepare really well-written work or to prepare presentations. So let's get started. When we label sentences and make diagrams, we need to start at the smallest, most granular spot. So if you think of the microscope zooming in to the smallest level, that's where we're going to start. So we label the parts of speech first. So we're going to begin with we is a pronoun, drank is a verb, and abundantly is an adverb. The next thing to do is to look at any groupings that are phrases. Okay, we don't really have any phrases in this short sentence, so we'll skip that step. Label any phrases nested inside other phrases. Again, we don't have that, so we'll skip it. Then we need to label the grammatical rules at the top hierarchy. So a pronoun is the subject in the sentence. Drank abundantly is the predicate. Drank is the head verb, or the head of the predicate. But basically, we have a subject and a predicate. One of the things that we've looked at in other videos is sentence types. When you have one subject and predicate pair, it's called a simple sentence. It's not simple because it's short or easy to write. It's simple because it has one pair, meaning it's not complicated. So let's try labeling another sentence. First, we'll start with the parts of speech. The is a determiner. Lonely is an adjective. Calf is a noun. Cried is a verb. For is a preposition. Its is a determiner. And mother is a noun. Next step is to look for phrases. So if you see a determiner, you need to look for the noun it's attached to. In this case, the is attached to calf. There's nothing after calf except a verb, so that means that this noun is the head noun. This adjective describes this noun. So basically, we can group this together. And this will be called a noun phrase. Next, we have its mother. So we have a determiner connected to this noun, and it is a noun phrase. So now we want to look for phrases nested inside other phrases. As a noun phrase, this is the object of a preposition. And the preposition that it is the object to is for. So together, for its mother is a prepositional phrase. Okay, there's only one verb, cried. There's not any other verbs around it, so there's no verb phrase. So now we're ready to look at the top hierarchy. So this noun phrase, the lonely calf, is the subject of the sentence. Cried for its mother, you have the main verb plus this adverb, what it cried for. So all of this together is the predicate of the sentence. We have one subject-predicate pair, so this is a simple sentence. Let's try diagramming this sentence. It's a little different because we have a different type of verb. We have the verb to be. After the verb are, there are no other verbs immediately next to it. So that means we know this is a linking verb. Then we have lettuce seeds. Seeds is a noun and lettuce is a noun. Two nouns next to each other is not normal. We need to figure out what's going on. There's no conjunction here. I'm not saying lettuce and seeds. I'm saying lettuce seeds. Lettuce seeds is telling us what kind of seeds we're talking about. So when you have a noun that's answering the question, what kind of, this is describing this seeds. So this is actually an adjectival function. So it's a noun pretending to be an adjective to describe what kind of seeds we're talking about. So as a group, This is our noun phrase. Next, we have the easiest. So the is a determiner. Easiest is an adjective. But we don't usually have determiners in front of adjectives without a noun. So we have no noun here. You could say seed or plant or vegetable or something like that and put it here. But the truth of the matter is, in this sentence, it's not been placed there. That means that this easiest has to pretend to be a noun. So this is an adjective with a noun function. As you can see, parts of speech have to be flexible and play different roles in the sentence. So the easiest is a noun phrase. What about to grow? So to grow is an infinitive. Can I put in order to here? Lettuce seeds are the easiest in order to grow. Nope, doesn't work. So infinitive here is not an object. It has to still be a noun. Okay, so we have a complement. After a linking verb, we're always going to have a complement. But now, what does this infinitive do? This is also a complement. So we have one complement, the easiest. To grow is another complement. This complement is completing the meaning of easiest. As a group, then, this is one big complement. So we have a linking verb plus a complement, and that's going to create a predicate. This noun phrase is going to be the subject. So subject plus predicate is a simple sentence once again. Here are some sentences I've already done in diagram form. So the cat is our noun phrase, which is the subject. Came is the main verb of the predicate. Adverb, back. That afternoon, this is called a prepositional noun phrase because the meaning of during could be inserted in here, but we don't say it. We just keep it in the back of our mind to mean during or in. So because we delete it, we have a noun phrase, but it has a prepositional that's invisible, so it's called a prepositional noun phrase. And it's an adverbial. So the main verb plus an adverb plus another adverbial becomes the verb phrase. At the top level of the hierarchy, we have the sentence role of subject and the predicate. So once again, we have a simple sentence. Let's look at this one. We have after a preposition, and napping is a gerund. Remember that nouns come after prepositions. So this is a prepositional phrase. It is describing when it happens, so it's an adverbial. Notice that it's a sentence beginning with an adverbial, so we'll put a comma there. We have a noun phrase, the dog, which is the subject. Then we have the main verb, the head of the predicate is chased. His tail is a determiner and a noun, which becomes a noun phrase. This happens to be the object of the verb. Relentlessly explains how it happens, so it's an adverbial. The predicate begins with the head verb, any objects, and any adverbials that come after it. So now we have an adverbial separated by a comma, and then the subject and the predicate. So again, we have a simple sentence. Here is a little bit more complicated one. We have a comma, so that's a sign that something is going on. We have a subordinating conjunction. We have a pronoun, a verb, we have another pronoun, and we have an adverb. We have another pronoun. Would is an auxiliary. End up is a phrasal verb. Going is a gerund. To is a preposition. And Burger King is a noun. So we have a prepositional phrase that answers the question where. End up what? Going. So this is the object of the verb end up. Would end up is a verb phrase, and we is a pronoun. Us is the object of invited, and they is a subordinating conjunction. So what we need to do now is look at some of the hierarchy. We'll have the subject, invited us out, is the predicate, and the subordinating conjunction. Because it begins with a subordinating conjunction, this is an adverb. This is an adverb clause. Next, we have this little pronoun all by itself is the subject. End up going to Burger King is the main verb, end up, the object going to Burger King, the adverbial. A predicate consists of the main verb followed by any objects or adverbials. So this all is a predicate. Now, because we have two subject pairs, the one inside the adverb clause and the independent one, now we have a complex sentence. Complex sentences happen when you see this difference in hierarchy. Adverb clause is still describing the whole independent clause pair. I can erase whenever they invited us out and just say we would end up going to Burger King. But the question is, well, under what conditions or when? And that's why this adverb clause completes the meaning and gives us a complex sentence. One other sentence type that we mentioned way back at the beginning, and that's the compound sentence. Compound sentences have a fanboy conjunction, or a coordinating conjunction, it's called. So here's our conjunction. We is a pronoun. Did is an auxiliary verb. Not is an adverb. Like is a verb. And it is a pronoun. We is a pronoun. Painted is a verb. The is a determiner. Kitchen is a noun. And blue is an adjective. Oops, adjective. So let's make some phrases here. The kitchen is our noun phrase. Didn't like, this is a verb phrase. Okay, now we need to go up in hierarchy a little bit. Blue is an object complement, and it describes this noun phrase. All of this is the object. Painted is the verb. Verb plus object equals a predicate. We happens to be the subject. Then we have a conjunction. And because it's a coordinating conjunction, it stands kind of by itself. Then we is a subject. Didn't like it It is the object of the verb phrase. All of this together is the predicate. So we have subject plus predicate pair plus a conjunction plus another subject predicate pair. This conjunction is one of the fanboys, one of the coordinating conjunctions. So these two halves are equal in weight. So that makes them compound, not complex. The definition of compound sentences is that each clause can stand by itself if it were separated without the conjunction. So I could say, we painted the kitchen blue, period. We didn't like it, period. Both those sentences could stand by themselves as simple sentences, and then we join it with but to make a compound sentence. So that is the test to see if it is compound instead of complex. Here is another type of sentence that is complex. We have a determiner. We have a noun. We have a pronoun, a verb, a preposition, a determiner, a noun, a verb. After this verb, was, it's the verb to be, there is not another action verb, dynamic verb of any kind, so that means this is a linking verb. Hers is a pronoun. So let's say if we can group these into any phrases next. The boat becomes a noun phrase. The dock is also a noun phrase. What's the function of this noun phrase? It's the object of the preposition near. So I have a prepositional phrase. What's the function of this prepositional phrase? It answers the question where, so it is an adverb that describes the verb sank. That means all of this is a predicate. What's the subject for this predicate? So what sank? The boat, but the boat is way over here. I have this pronoun in between. So this pronoun is actually the subject for this predicate. And all of this together is an adjective clause describing which boat I'm talking about. So now I have the boat was hers. So if I erase this adjective clause, I have a complete sentence. If I try to take the adjective clause and let it sit by itself and say, that sank near the dock, it doesn't make sense. So it's a dependent clause that has to be inside the main clause. So the boat that sank near the dock, all of this, think of layers of onions. This is a big outer layer, is the subject. The linking verb was hers. Hers is the complement, and it goes together with the linking verb. But as a group, those two are a predicate. So I have subject plus predicate, and in a deeper level, I have the subject and predicate of the adjective clause. So in hierarchy levels and hierarchy terms, the adjective clause is lower than or deeper inside the onion. So it is not equal to the independent main clause as it would be in a compound sentence. So this is a complex sentence because one of the clauses is not equal in status to the main clause. So I hope these diagrams have helped you, and I'd like you to try to write some sentences, some simple ones, some compound ones, some complex ones, and draw diagrams.